Hello and welcome to another episode of the Practical Permaculture Podcast. I'm your host, Alysse Gallagher. So, this episode is a little bit late because I've started a new job this week, and overambitious me thought I could get the episode out on Friday as planned, but my husband went away for work, so I was solo parenting, getting the kids ready for school and trying to get to a new job in time all on my own. So it was a bit of a hectic week and I apologize. So it is coming out today, Sunday, instead of Friday. So yes, big news, new job, full time. So it'll be a bit of a juggle with the podcast. I'm wanting to keep it going to the best of my abilities. So I've got one more episode next week and then we are on a 2-week season break again. That has just come around so fast. So normally in my 2-week break, I record all of my episodes and then I drip feed them throughout the 8 weeks for our season. But that won't be able to happen because I'm now working full time. So I don't know how this is going to work. I'll have to be recording at nights, I guess, or on my lunch breaks. But where I work, there's a lot of noise. So I don't know if even that will work. So you'll have to bear with me. So we'll do next week's episode and I will keep you posted on what the podcast looks like going forward. But for now, enjoy this episode. I chat with Susan, who is an orchard expert, and we talk about her establishing a orchard in their local community garden area and how to care for your fruit and nut trees at home. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Welcome to the Practical Permaculture Podcast, your weekly dose of gardening, intentional living, and all things permaculture, served with a side of fun and plenty of great conversations. I'm your host, Alysse, and together we'll dig into practical tips, chat with experts, and explore ways to cultivate a more abundant, sustainable life. Let's get growing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Susan, who is our guest for today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much.
And as you can tell, Susan is not Australian. So where are you calling in from?
I'm actually in Toronto, Canada.
Lovely. And so what's the climate like there for people who might not be familiar?
Yeah, so we've got winter. We've got long winters. We've got decent length of summer. So our summer is like 6 months or something.
Okay.
And so we can grow all sorts of fruit trees, including apples and pears and apricots and peaches and all sorts of good stuff. But the winters do get quite cold, and it is important for our trees to have that dormant season. Yeah.
Excellent. And so you kind of touched on it already, fruit trees. That's what we're here to talk about today. For someone who doesn't know anything about you, do you want to kind of give us a bit about what you do and your context?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was new to growing fruit trees. I started about 15 years ago, and I was really interested in growing fruit trees in my local park. At that time, community gardens were becoming popular. So people were growing vegetables in their community parks. And here in Toronto, it was not common to be planting fruit trees. And there's good reason for that.
Okay.
You know, you can have a veggie garden and you plant it this year. And if people abandon that veggie garden, the city can just cover it up and put grass on top, With fruit trees, it's a long-term crop. And I was surprised at how easy it was to get permission to do this. At the time that I started, I was very naive about fruit trees. I really, truly believed that you could plant these trees and grow them, quote unquote, organically. And i.e., don't use toxic sprays, just plant them, water them, and then the harvest will just come and everything's going to be just fine. I had no idea, Alysse, that there were so many pest and disease problems that were possibilities, poor production. I didn't even know that you have to be very careful when choosing your fruit tree, because if you choose the wrong trees, they won't cross-pollinate and you won't get any fruit, even after waiting like 5 years. So, I really had an uphill battle learning about how to care for these trees. And the funny thing was that while the city at the time was very supportive, we had a park supervisor who was absolutely amazing and he loved fruit trees. And he
Mhm.
said, yes, let's do it. And we had a meeting with the community where we explained the idea. This is a community orchard. Everybody will share the harvest. The volunteers will take care of the trees and the pollinator garden and all this stuff. But there were a few people who really did not like the idea.
Oh, why?
And yeah, they did not want an orchard. They did not want what they called a fruit farm in their local park.
Okay.
Saying this, the park was really a neglected green space. Like nobody spent any time there.
Mhm.
And it was a dive. It,
Yeah, right.
it's it was not a nice park, and that's what I wanted to brighten it up with blossoms and fruit and activities and all
Mm.
sorts of wonderful things. So there were people who said this is going to be a big disaster. This is a bad idea. And in the end, we came up with our city councilor. There was a compromise where we were allowed to plant a certain number of trees.
Mhm.
And I knew people were watching me. I knew this had to be a success, right?
Yeah.
So in the end, I had to learn. I had to learn about growing fruit trees. As soon as there were some problems, I knew people would be pointing their finger at me and saying, you did this. We told you this was a bad idea. If you now fast forward 15 years, the park is an absolute delight. There are
Oh,
blossoms in the spring, there's fruit, there's harvest festivals, there's gatherings with the community where the children harvest the trees. There's
so
always
nice.
activities and people, and it's really a wonderful space to visit. It's really delightful. But the biggest gift I had, and in life, sometimes the biggest gifts are your biggest challenges, was having those people look at me and saying, we're watching you,
Mm.
because I had to do my research and I had to figure out how to grow those trees successfully. I couldn't fail. So everything that I learned, I wanted to teach others. I'm a journalist by my background is as journalism and broadcasting and filmmaking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I wrote books about how to grow fruit trees. I create online courses. I have a podcast, and it's all about empowering everybody to grow fruit trees wherever you live.
Yeah, it's so cool. And so how many trees did you end up with in the park in the end?
It's funny because there was I don't usually count. It's not a lot. It's under 20, but because of the trauma of wanting, I think we were pitching for 25 fruit trees and there was a battle about how many we could have and this many shade trees and this many whatever.
Yeah.
I honestly can't remember, but it's like probably 18 to 20 trees. There's a mix. We also
Lovely.
have serviceberry trees, which are native trees,
Yeah.
but just a handful, not a ton of trees in the park.
Beautiful. Oh, that's so lovely. I've been trying to get a community garden started, and it's actually quite a, process to go through the council and all the things and even insurance. And, I didn't realize what an uphill battle it was potentially going to be. And it's still kind of something that's very new and in the works. So, yeah, I'm
Hmm.
very inspired by that because it's something that I'd love to do.
Yes. Actually, my first book, Growing Urban Orchards, that's the one I published way back in 2014. And the goal of that book was to teach people, including myself, what is the minimum I need to do in order to grow fruit trees successfully? The
Yeah.
minimum, because I knew
Mm.
this is hard. What do I need to do? And that's all the story of us planting the orchard and developing.
Oh,
It's the story
beautiful.
of what you're launching into.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and I've got to say it's worth persevering.
Mm.
15 years later, some of the most wonderful people in my life I know through the orchard. These are people who are
Yeah.
in my neighborhood. In this day and age, if you have friends, they live on the other side of the city. Well, my friends are all nearby. And
Mm.
when I got sick in 2017, the people who were knocking on my door saying, we want to let us come in and cheer you up and spend time with you. They're all the people from the orchard. It's
So
very
cool.
beautiful. Yeah.
That's lovely. And so we were talking before we hit record about my block to give you a bit of context. So I've only ever really done veggie patch gardening, and now we've got a block. I knew that the fruit trees and some selected nut trees, citrus, that kind of thing, I wanted to get in early because they obviously take a long time to produce a yield. And I didn't want to wait 5 years and then put them in and then have to wait another 5 to 7 years. So we've got all these bare rooted fruit trees that are ready to go in, but I'm absolutely clueless because I've never planted any fruit trees before. So give me your tips. What should I be thinking about with these bare rooted trees that I have? And some of them are actually, we got them last season and I potted them up and they've just been sitting there because I didn't get a chance to figure out exactly where I wanted them. So yeah.
So I know so many people, everybody, we all do this, by the way. We all are like, okay, it's going to take a long time for these trees to fruit. If possible, the greatest thing to do is to do a plan. And I'm
Yeah.
just like you. We decided to do the orchard, and like 2 months later, we bought the trees. And hey, we didn't even buy bare root fruit trees. We bought potted fruit trees, which are usually less healthy, more mature, which is not an ideal situation. So the best thing you can do before you buy the trees is to
Yeah.
research trees that are easier to grow, disease resistant.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Consider carefully what kind of rootstock you're getting. So is the tree going to be full size or is it going to be a dwarfing tree? And I'm sure you
Yeah.
did some of that research.
Mm.
Once you have those bare root trees, this is the interesting part. Usually people get the trees in the dormant season, so the late fall or early spring. And you get the trees, they are literally, there is no soil on the root system. They are like often tiny. They're often just like one branch with some
Yeah.
roots,
Yeah.
young little trees. And that is perfect because at that point you can sculpt your tree into a strong fruit bearing structure. If you
Mm-hmm.
get an older tree and a bigger tree, you think you're ahead of the game, but those branches and the trunk are really they're lignified, so they're sort of hardened off, and so it's already got its shape. And when you make a cut, it it actually wounds the tree more than when it's a young
Ah.
tree
Yeah.
and you're just there. The branches are so soft, if there even is any branches.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is you get your tree, the bare root tree, you plant it right away. And if you can't, you do what you did, which is you pot them up. You can't just
Okay.
keep them in the freezer or whatever. They need to
Yeah.
be put in soil.
Sure.
So these trees should be young,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to plant them,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that your hole is twice the width of the roots when they're stretched out. You want those roots
Sure.
to stretch out far and wide
Yeah.
so that the tree can really establish itself. And a mistake a lot of people make is they make a hole that's just as far as the roots.
Mm-hmm.
But hopefully, in the first season, if your soil is good and you've prepared well and whatever, those roots are going to keep reaching. So if
Okay.
you can make a really nice big hole, twice
Mm-hmm.
the width of those roots stretched out, it's
Mm-hmm.
like a big saucer, like an
Yeah.
upside down flying saucer UFO.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you would then plant the tree, making
Mm-hmm.
sure that the graft union is above the soil line. So,
Yes.
as you know, fruit trees are made up of two trees, right? They're like Franken trees. You've got the rootstock with that's one tree, and then the fruiting wood, which is the trunk.
Yeah.
And so that place where the two trees are joined together and grafted together must be above the soil line, ideally 6 inches, but it all
Okay.
depends on where they grafted it. The
Yes.
reason you don't want to bury it, the graft union, is what you don't want is the top part of the tree to root, because
Mm-hmm.
if it does, you lose all the benefits of the root system.
Sure.
So it would bypass that root system, the root stock, which
Mm-hmm.
may offer disease resistance and it may offer dwarfing tree size. It may offer early or later flowering times. So
Mm-hmm.
all the benefits of the root stocks will be lost if you bury that graft union and
Sure.
the top part roots.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you have the roots, I've seen people, and my mum's even done it when we're planting together, where you pop the roots in like a liquid solution to like untangle them a little bit. Is that a good idea? And to kind of give
Awesome
them a bit of,
idea.
yeah.
Yes. So what I do is I take the bare root trees
Mm-hmm.
before, while I'm digging the holes, I put them in a bucket of water and help,
Yeah,
like, just to help them hydrate.
yeah.
So let's say 30 minutes, probably not
Mm-hmm.
more than that. But that's a great idea. Another great idea that you may want to do before planting, fill up
Mm-hmm.
the hole. You've made the hole, fill up the hole with water, let it drain
Lovely.
out,
Yeah, yeah.
and then plant the tree. And then you're still going to water it in, but you're just giving it the best start possible.
Mm-mm. I've done that
Yeah,
before where you plant a tree and then you kind of water it in and then you realize like under a centimeter it's still dry. So I can see the benefit of that.
exactly.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. The other interesting thing that you'll find is I try to, in new planting sites, if I'm involved, I
Yeah.
try to get people to dig the hole in advance just to make sure, because what happens sometimes is
Okay.
there's some areas, if you've got heavy clay soil, where there's
Mm-hmm.
terrible drainage. So you
Yeah.
fill up, you dig the hole like even a month in advance, a year in
Mm-hmm.
advance, when you know you want to plant the tree there, you fill it up with water and you wait.
Yeah.
And, if it kind of never drains out, this is not a good place for a fruit tree.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, because we knew in advance, so we did a permaculture design course and planned out our property, made a few tweaks once we got here because we didn't realize how low the sun would dip and it's hitting canopy of trees on the block next
Oh,
to us. So we made a few tweaks, but what we've done is actually mound up where our fruit trees are going a year ago. And we've been in situ composting in those mounds. Yeah, so then this
fabulous.
year it's a bit better soil than just planting it in either soil from the nursery, but we've just gotten soil from our block, which is very heavy clay. So we've mixed it in with some gypsum and we've been in situ composting and just kind of adding coffee grounds and just organic matter and covered it all with mulch. So it's just been sitting there and hopefully establishing itself a little bit and creating some, healthy bacteria and microbes and everything in there before we go planting our fruit trees because I want them to try and have the best start as possible.
That is so great. That what you did is ideal. In
Okay.
professional commercial organic orchards, will, believe it or not, prepare
Mm-hmm.
3 years in advance.
Wow,
Three
really?
years.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So year one, they test the soil. And I always recommend people, if they do that, you really only need to test the soil once. If your
Mm-hmm.
soil is basically okay, or you need to tweak, you take your soil test, you send it to the lab,
Mm-hmm.
and the lab will come back to you with recommendations. If you
Mm-hmm.
need to correct the soil, you tell the lab you're going to be growing fruit trees there and what type of fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And then you may need to correct the soil. So that a professional commercial orchard will do that in year one. And then plant cover crops.
Yeah.
As cover crop in the spring, a cover crop in the summer, cover crop in the fall.
Yeah.
And the following year, they test the soil again, because this is
Mm-hmm.
a commercial orchard, just to see, okay, is it in balance? Whatever we corrected last year, is everything okay? They do more cover crops.
Yeah.
And then the third year, maybe they'll plant the trees.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
what you're doing is creating a fabulous environment where the tree will certainly thrive, because you
Mm.
really have taken care. I know from my own backyard, where we have a veggie garden, for
Mm-hmm.
years we didn't really care for the soil. We'd bring in stuff. We even bought worm compost one year. Wonderful. But the soil never had actual worms in it. It didn't clump together nicely. It,
Mm.
it didn't retain moisture. It was a bunch of dust. And we'd keep putting our veggies in and whatever. We did two things. I'm very interested in regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
So, best free resource, leaves in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
We, in the fall, collected our neighbors' leaves, collected our own leaves, ground them up with this kind of, you get it on Amazon or something. It's like a string trimmer thing, and it grinds up
Oh yeah.
leaves,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And so we ground up the leaves and we covered the beds, always leaving the soil covered, always covering the soil. So we covered
Yeah.
the beds over the winter. The following year, we pushed back whatever was left of those ground up leaves, and we put probably 3 inches or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the soil was fantastic. There were worms for the first time ever. Last year, my husband did a cover crop planting.
Yeah.
And so we also did the leaves. This year, oh my gosh, our soil is a worm party. Like
Oh, cool.
everything, it's so fun to plant your veggies because
Yeah.
all you do is you dig a hole, you pop the stuff in, you hardly even have to tamp it down.
Yeah.
It's so filled with moisture and goodness. And I think to
Mm.
myself, had I known this before planting my fruit trees 15 years ago, how much, I mean, our fruit trees, knock on wood, they're healthy, they're doing great, but
Yeah.
how much healthier and happier they would have been in the early years to
Mm.
go into that kind of welcoming environment where you've got all the soil microbes preparing to feed you and nurture you and take care of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, once we've got the hole, so we're going back to like the planting process. Is there anything I should be putting in the hole before the tree goes in?
well, something I don't, to be honest, I
Okay.
don't.
Yeah.
But I
Because you hear
just
people,
recently,
like burying either animals or fish or putting potash or, there's so many. You go on the internet and anything you want to do can be backed up by somebody. So it's
exactly.
really confusing to know what's the best thing to do.
Yes, yes. So I don't and never
Mm-hmm.
have. However, the podcast that I am that's coming out that I've already pre-recorded for my show this month
Mm-hmm.
was a fascinating interview with a regenerative grower. And he is somebody who is so knowledgeable, has been teaching for years, and I have so much faith in him. He uses just a sprinkle of rock dust, volcanic
Oh,
rock
yes.
dust.
Yeah.
And in the show, he explains how there are certain types of bacteria that do eat the rock dust. And
Mm.
maybe I'll send you a link when the show comes out
Yes, yeah,
because
pop it in the
I
show
have to
notes.
listen again. It was like mind blowing information. So you could do that. But I
Yeah.
would definitely not put anything with nitrogen in the soil.
Okay.
And actually, I don't amend the soil at all unless
Mm-hmm.
it's absolutely terrible.
Okay.
That bare root tree needs to adapt to its new environment. So some people
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, mix in some compost. No, the compost is too harsh for a young bare root tree.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
has to get used to the soil that it's in.
Yeah.
Um, and we don't even, we will plant the tree, we will tamp it down. You can definitely put a little bit, like a thin layer of wood chips, not too much, because the wood chips, when they start to break down, they can take some of the nitrogen out of the soil, and young
Yeah.
trees really need it. But we definitely protect the tree somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what your local pests are, you may need to make a little bunny fence or something like that to protect the trunk from nibbling critters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't add a lot. I really don't.
Okay. And then in terms of feeding it afterwards, do you feed them on a
So
schedule
this
of some sort or?
the same thing, okay, there's some options. Again, you don't want to freak out the tree and add nitrogen in the first year. You
Yeah,
really
okay.
don't. This
Right.
tree wants to grow, but here's what you do, right? The first year, honestly, I don't even mulch with compost. I just want it to adapt to the soil. The way I
Mm-hmm.
encourage it to grow is by pruning that bare root tree. So
Okay.
hopefully it's a young tree like a whip where there's hardly any side branches. You want to be planting the youngest bare root tree possible in my books,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can sculpt it into the ideal fruit bearing structure and it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
If it's an older tree, you have to do a few different things. But if you're planting a whip, a young 1 year old bare root tree, by making one cut, okay, you're basically cutting off the top third of the tree.
Mm-hmm. Which
So
seems
what
drastic.
happens? It
It seems
seems
drastic.
drastic.
Yeah.
It seems drastic, and people have so much resistance, and I had so much resistance to it, but I have seen over and over again what happens.
Yeah.
And once you understand the science, it makes
Mm-hmm.
so much sense. A dormant bare root tree
Mm-hmm.
has energy in its root system. So
Mm-hmm.
over the winter, like over the previous year, it would have had some leaves. The leaves would have photosynthesized and brought energy into the tree. It would have used some of that energy, and then it stashes the rest of the energy in its wood and mostly in its root system.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say this little tree has 10 units of energy in its root system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say it has 10 buds. So each bud gets 1/10 of that energy.
Mhm.
But if you cut off the top 3 buds,
Yep.
then each of the remaining 7 buds will get more of the energy from the root
Mm.
system. They will
Mm.
grow longer, they will be stronger.
Mhm.
Usually, you do the whip cut on this 1-year-old bare root tree.
Yep.
Usually, you do it at about 36 inches above the ground.
Okay.
That's around where you want the first lowest branches to be, anyways.
Mhm.
So, you make that one cut. That encourages
Mhm.
vigorous growth of the top part of the tree. It also encourages growth of the root system.
Mm.
So that's how you're trying to establish your tree. People will say, oh, but my tree, it already has some branches and it looks so big and I'm ahead
Yeah.
of the game. You're not ahead of the game. When you don't do, and this is only, we're only talking about bare root trees, we're not talking about potted trees, but
Right.
when you don't do a cut on in the first day, on the day that you plant your tree, certainly
Mhm.
in the first year, but we always do it on the first day,
Mhm.
you're losing that opportunity. And the tree will have to support all the little branches and all the buds and whatever with such a limited amount of energy. So
Yeah.
it won't have the energy to expand its root system and to
Mhm.
grow longer branches. You'll get a bunch of little branches, if
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah.
that's what we do instead of fertilizer in year one.
Okay. And so with the potted trees, so like my ones that I potted up last year, how do I prune them back? Like what's the process with that then?
I would love to see them because it depends how thick the branches are. When I'm
Yeah.
talking about potted trees, when you know how you go to the garden center and they have big trees, sometimes they even sell trees that have fruit hanging on the limbs.
Yes.
So, you know what I mean? People are bringing
Yes.
it home and saying, oh, look at me. I've spent extra to buy a bigger tree and I'm going to get a really early harvest. I'm going to harvest this year. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, not so much because what
Okay.
has happened there is
Yeah.
the tree is older
Mhm.
and you've forced this tree with hardly any roots and whatever it has is stuffed into a pot. So
Mhm.
it really hasn't been able to expand its, it's just anyways stuck in the pot and you've
Mhm.
forced it to use its valuable energy to create fruit for you to
Mhm.
eat. Well, that's taking energy away from the tree's root system, away from it creating the right structure.
Yeah.
And the trunk and the side branches are often lignified, which means hardened off.
Mhm.
And so you've got this weird structure. What do I do with it? How do I make it so it'll grow into the right structure? And we can talk
Mhm.
about what is right and wrong.
Yeah.
So if your trees are still quite malleable, a little
Mhm.
bit like the branches aren't really hardened off too much, I would, this is such a hard question.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a hard question. I'd have to see it. I
Yeah.
might do a cut or two,
Yeah.
or I might wait a year with a tree, a potted tree from a garden center. I would certainly wait 1 year and
Yeah.
then start pruning it.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah,
guess there's kind of two schools of thought too. Like when you're talking about shaping trees, we're planning on espaliering our trees because we need
yeah,
to net them. I don't want to have to put big hoops and worry about that. And
yeah.
I want to create a little kind of diverse garden underneath some of them as well and, support them in that way. So, yeah, that's the other part of it too, because once I plant them, I have to make sure they're facing the right way and that, I've got the right treat like the right branches that I'll be pruning. So it's kind of another layer to it, I guess, as well,
It
because
is
I will
indeed.
be, yeah.
And the longer that you leave that tree,
Mm.
the harder it's going to be to create your espalier shape,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because espalier, or espalier, or whatever, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's the idea is that you're working with the soft branches that have not yet been lignified. So you
Mm-hmm.
can bend them, you can shape them, you can tie
Yes.
them down. There's also different ways to create fruiting wall type
Mm-hmm.
plantings. If your trees have branches already, if they are on dwarfing rootstocks, you
Mm-hmm.
could actually do something like a tall spindle planting, which is also supported by a trellis.
Mhm.
But instead of pruning, you do and eventually prune those trees, but you tie down the branches to just below horizontal. You
Yeah.
let it get as shrubby as you're not shrubby. You're pruning as minimally as possible.
Mhm.
And then it's still on a trellis. It may not exactly be a fruiting wall, but you would be able to cover it, I think.
Mhm.
And then the only pruning you do there is once those side branches are half the thickness of the trunk, you need to remove them with a stub cut, leaving a little sort of stub here.
Mhm.
And then a new shoot will come from the stub.
Mm.
I've got a couple, I've created courses on this topic and I've taught at colleges.
Yeah.
But basically, it's a wonderfully productive way of growing fruit trees.
Mm.
Now, this is specifically for apples. I don't know if you're growing apples.
Mhm.
Um, but and you can do pears as well. So it's very productive. You get fruit in the early years,
Yeah.
and yeah, you could be very successful. In comparison, the Espalier fruit trees do not produce a ton of fruit because it's an art form more than a fruit production machine. It's like
Mm.
each tree will give you a handful of apples or pears, but not a lot. So it just
Mm.
depends what you're looking for, how much space you have, how many trees, and do you also want it to be a beautiful, garden? To me, every fruit tree is beautiful. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
so I'm also confused about winter pruning versus summer pruning and what needs to be cut when, because there's also a lot of chat about that online. So can you explain that to
absolutely.
me a little bit?
It's a very important question. And it took me years to even figure out like the difference. What is the difference? So
Mhm.
we talked about the science of pruning a whip, which is
Mhm.
essentially winter pruning.
Mhm.
Winter pruning is when the tree is fully dormant. No leaves, no flowers, no fruit, none.
Yeah.
All that energy is in the root system.
Mhm.
So the energy from the previous year is stored in the root system. You are reducing the number of buds or the number of branches so that when the spring comes, each bud or branch gets more energy. So winter pruning stimulates vigorous growth.
Okay.
Winter pruning is ideal for young trees when you want to make that tree bigger, faster. I want you
Okay.
to grow fast. It's
Mhm.
ideal for shaping a young tree because when you're creating a
Mhm.
shape, you need stuff to happen quickly. Often,
Mhm.
for the first 3 years after you plant a bare root tree specifically, or a young tree in a pot, like in your situation, I don't think your trees are going to be too mature.
Mm.
Um, for 3 years, it's the formative pruning where you're creating the shape for that tree that will last a lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so that's mostly winter pruning. Summer pruning is different. Summer pruning actually can help you keep a big tree, small. So let's think about the science. In the spring, all the energy comes up, and you haven't, let's say, pruned in the winter. So let's say you've got 10 units of energy in the root
Mhm.
system, and you've got a tree with 10 branches.
Mhm.
Each branch uses up 1/10 of that energy to have leaves, blossoms, maybe even form some fruitlets. It's
Mhm.
running a marathon, it's burning up that energy. By the summer, there's not much energy left in the root system.
Sure. Yeah.
So, when you then, and some changes have happened with the tree hormones. In the winter, the hormones in the tree are encouraging that tree to grow longer shoots.
Mhm.
But those hormones, called auxin hormones and gibberellin hormones, they kind of wane in the summer. They're not so active. So, the
Okay.
summer, not much energy in the root system.
Mhm.
The tree has started creating leaves and photosynthesizing. It's making its own energy and using it, right? To grow, to support itself.
Yeah.
So when you prune in the summer, which is usually early summer, sometime after blossom time,
Mhm.
you're actually not going to encourage or stimulate vigorous growth. It's
Sure.
not going to cause lots of new shoots to grow. It's not going to extend the length of the shoots as much.
Mhm.
So, summer pruning slows down growth. It's perfect if you've got a big cherry tree or a big apricot tree that you want to slow down the growth. Because, please, I really don't want it to be 3 stories tall,
Yeah.
right? And also, summer pruning, because of the hormonal changes with the tree, Summer pruning can encourage the growth of or the support can support fruiting buds.
Okay.
So instead of supporting branches, you're telling the tree, could you please put your energy towards some fruiting buds for me for next year?
Okay.
Okay, so the whole system changes. When you don't want to prune your fruit tree is after midsummer. If it's especially if you're in a colder climate like mine, but even warmer climates have some sort of dormant season where the growth slows.
Okay. Yeah.
So, especially if you're in a cooler climate where there could be a frost, you do not want to encourage any growth um, past midsummer. So, you don't want to prune in the fall. You don't want to prune in the late summer. Sometimes with Espalier, you do a little bit of early summer, like midsummer pruning. That's a whole different science. But ultimately, what could happen is even though summer pruning does not cause lots of shoots to grow, it can cause some. And those shoots will be soft, not lignified, where you're talking a lot about lignification or hardening off, and
Mm-hmm.
filled with water. That's what makes them soft. So if there is a frost and those little young
Yeah.
shoots freeze,
Mm-hmm.
they can sort of die. They will
Yeah.
die, cause a wound in the tree, and make the tree vulnerable to getting pest and disease problems.
Mm-hmm.
Where pests and diseases love tree wounds, they'll just go
Yeah.
make a beeline for the wounds.
If you see
Yeah.
those wounds, should you get rid of them, cut them, cover them? What's kind of the process?
Yeah, good question. If you see disease, you should always remove it. It's good to be able to identify the diseases for the tree. So I remember I was totally overwhelmed. Oh my God, there's so many diseases. How am I going to figure this out?
Mm-hmm.
Each type of fruit tree has a finite amount of diseases that they get. So
Mm-hmm.
if you do your homework and learn in one of my courses that I teach, the seven main diseases that fruit trees get, learn to
Yeah.
recognize them.
Yeah.
Many of them can be dealt with pruning. If you prune out the branch right away correctly, you
Mm-hmm.
just get rid of the problem. Don't put the
Yeah.
branch in
Okay.
your compost, get it off the site.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of wounds, I wouldn't I wouldn't. I would not remove it just because there's a wound on the branch. It may be fine. And
Mm-hmm.
trees naturally know how to heal their own wounds. The problem is that in the fall, when growth slows, they're not going to do that as much. Here's an interesting fact: when you cut off a branch correctly, that's a correct spot. Like, you don't leave a stub on the hole. Please do not leave stubs because they don't heal. If you cut just past the collar, which is sort of like a little swollen area at the top of a branch, you cut just past a collar, and you'll find, well, what happens that we can't see is a layer of cells come from the collar, which remains there to cover up the wound and
Uh-huh.
protect the wound within hours, perhaps a
Oh,
day or
okay.
two.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then over time, over the years, you will see, if it's a bigger wound, that the tree actually grows and covers its own wound. So trees
Mm-hmm.
know how to heal. The
Yeah.
problem is if the wound happens in the late, in the fall when
Mm.
growth slows, then it's not really going to cover up and you have to wait till the next spring.
Yeah.
But no, you don't need to go and cut out wounds. You just try to not
Mm.
cause new ones to happen.
We had a massive hailstorm in
Ooh.
October, which is our spring, and a lot of our trees were brand new, and so the actual trunks of the trees got hail damage, and you can see there's these little bumps that they've kind of tried to, and I don't know whether they're going to be okay because it's the first season really we've had them in, so we'll see how some of them go, but a lot of the
Yeah.
branches have these kind of nicks in them that have kind of started to heal over, and they've gotten a bit calloused. So yeah, I'm
Oh, that's
interested to
good.
see. Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. So the heals, it sounds like the wounds are healing.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we had, I think it was 2013 or something. Some of our trees were still quite young. There
Yeah.
was an ice storm in Toronto where I
Okay.
live. Oh my gosh. We had full size, huge trees that fell down all over the city. It was
Oh
a
wow.
disaster. And we had these young trees in the park that we had been pruning for the last 3-4 years
Yeah.
correctly to create a strong fruit bearing structure for the tree.
Mm-hmm.
Not one of our trees was damaged. even
Wow.
though they had thick ice on top of the branches.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you are pruning your fruit tree correctly, those branches become so strong that they
Mm-hmm.
can support a heavy harvest. So, of
Yeah.
course, they can support some ice,
Yeah,
right?
true, true.
So,
Yeah.
it's kind of inspiring to see how you're actually really partnering with your tree to create.
Mm,
Like, I really see growing fruit trees as a partnership. You're
yeah.
doing some of the work, it's doing some of the work. You're working together to just create this wonderful structure and an
Mm,
ideal environment to grow healthy fruit.
mm. And so, talking about winter and summer pruning, does that matter depending on when that tree fruits as well?
That's a good question. Yes and no. So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you do choose carefully. So, for instance, our cherry trees.
Mm-hmm.
So, our spring starts in, I don't know, April, May.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the cherry trees will produce the cherry harvest at the end of June or early July. And that's just like the beginning of the summer. We got a lot of summer ahead. So we do the harvesting, but we also sometimes, before the public comes, because we don't want them to see and misunderstand what we're doing, we know which branches we need to prune out. We're not willy nilly pruning out branches just because we want to get the cherries off.
Yeah.
But there's areas in the tree that there's branches that we know have got to go
Mm-hmm.
to be part of our healthy structure. And so before the public comes out to help with the harvest, we take our pole pruners and some of the high branches we will remove. They will be filled with cherries. We bring them to the harvest table, and when the volunteers come, they can take the cherries off those branches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one type of tree that you would do your summer pruning after harvest. However, you would never do that with an apple tree. Wait till the tree produces fruit because it's fall.
Okay.
Saying that, you would prune your tree, your apple tree, for instance, after blossom time and even a few weeks after blossom time when there's baby fruit on those branches. You will
Mm,
still be pruning off branches with baby fruit on it.
mm.
It's partly there is a thing called thinning the fruit, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You've got to make sure that the tree is not producing more fruit than it can sustain, rather
Mm,
than having a whole bunch of really bad quality little fruitlets that never grow to full size. You want tasty big fruit. And so
mm-hmm.
you thin the fruit. By pruning some of those branches and removing some of the fruitlets that would have taken some of the energy, you are thinning the fruit
Mm-hmm.
partially,
Mm-hmm.
and removing branches at the same time.
Yeah.
So yes, it we our habit is that we the plums and the apples we will prune at some point after blossom time, maybe 2-3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and the cherries would be after fruiting time.
Okay, that's interesting. And so when we're pruning, where are we pruning? Because there's things like tip pruning in other trees, I guess, that makes them full and bushy, but you're not doing that with a fruit tree. You're actually cutting the branch. So where do we cut it? Is there a particular type of cut that we should be doing? What's the best practice, I guess, for pruning back our trees?
In my book, I've written a book recently called Fruit Tree Pruning: The Science
Mm-hmm.
and Art of Cultivating Healthy Fruit Trees. And I talk about when you are pruning a tree, it's like an artist with just two paintbrushes, right? The thick and the thin. There's just two cuts. Either you are removing a branch to its origin. So imagine the trunk of the tree, you are removing a branch back to the trunk of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
You look very carefully to find something called the collar, that swollen area just past the trunk, and you leave the collar. So you're not leaving a stub. You are cutting just past the collar. And people who are listening might want to look up, tree branch collar to see what it looks like, or get a copy of my book.
Mm-hmm.
So you cut just past the collar, and that wound will heal beautifully because the collar is where those cells are that heal the wound.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's one cut. The other cut is when you shorten the branch. And that's called heading back. Now, heading back, you are cutting just about a quarter of an inch past a healthy bud. Okay. And that healthy bud should be sort of pointing outwards. You don't want to cut back after a bud that's going to produce a branch that grows in towards the trunk of the tree. You want an open
Sure.
sort of tree with branches that spread out, not up and down and in and out all over the place. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So those are your two cuts. What you need to know about those two cuts is this: every time you head back or shorten a branch,
Mm-hmm.
you are activating the buds on that branch that wouldn't have been activated. This has to do with plant hormones. So at the end of any branch, there is the terminal bud. And
Mm-hmm.
around the terminal bud, that's the last bud on the branch, there's these auxin hormones. And auxin hormones are very interesting. Auxin hormones tell the branch, grow longer, long, long, long. And
Mm-hmm.
it also tells the branch, this hormone suppress the side buds on those branches. So you get
Okay.
long, skinny branches without a lot of branchlets.
Yeah.
If you head back a branch, removing the last bud or the last few buds,
Mm-hmm.
you take away those auxin hormones. So the branch no longer wants to grow necessarily a lot longer. But the
Mm.
real side effect is those lateral buds along the side of the branch all of a sudden wake up. Nobody's suppressing them anymore. So you'll get
Mm.
a whole bunch of little side branches coming from that, and it's going to be a total mess. Because what you don't want a tree that looks like a shrub with a million branches and terrible air circulation, and all the branches are rubbing up against each other.
Yeah.
You want a strong, wide open canopy where
Mm-hmm.
sunlight can get in to ripen the fruit, where air can get in to keep the canopy dry.
Mm-hmm.
These are some of the main goals of pruning a fruit tree.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, if you have a million spindly branches, once
Mm-hmm.
they leaf out, there's no air circulation or sunlight penetration. And then when it rains, the canopy stays moist and
Mm-hmm.
dark, and
Yeah.
it's the perfect situation for fungal diseases because fungal spores love dark, damp spaces. So
Mm-hmm.
we're creating a strong structure, open structure where you get a lot of great air circulation and sunlight penetration. And
Mm-hmm.
just to briefly throw into the mix, with fruit trees, there are lots of different structures. In my book, I talk about the central leader structure and the
Mm-hmm.
open center structure. Open
Yeah.
center is a tree that looks like a vase or a goblet. So it's got a
Yes.
trunk with lots of, like, not lots, with 3 to 5 branches, and that's it, main
Okay.
branches.
Yeah.
Central leader looks more like a Christmas tree. It's got
Mm-hmm.
tiers of horizontal branches where the top tiers are narrower than the bottom.
Okay.
So those are all been sort of tested and tried, and they've been used for years to get all the
Mm.
benefits of the strong structure, air circulation, and sunlight penetration.
Okay. So let's talk about pest and disease a little bit. What should we be looking out for? Is it the leaf itself, the branch, the fruit? Like, where are we going to see these problems pop up?
Yeah, so again, it's like
Everywhere.
I'm everywhere basically. Yeah, it's like, oh boy. Yeah, pretty much everywhere. So some of the diseases appear on the leaves, like
Yeah.
rust, which is on apples and pears and their orange spots. Or
Mm-hmm.
some of them grow on the branches, like black knot, which gets this. It's black knot. I don't know if you guys have it, but people, arborists call it poop on a stick because it just like these, like, sort of black or brown sort of lumps that form on the
Right.
branches. And that's, plums get that a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see it on the fruit where
Mm-hmm.
you see the fruitlets all of a sudden have some oozing goop come out of them, like this bronzy oozing goop. And
Mm-hmm.
that's usually pests that have, like, codling moth or apple maggot that have laid their eggs
Yes.
under the skin of the fruit. So anything that's suspicious, you got to ask the question, what is this?
Yeah.
Um, but the great thing is, if you recognize the most common pest and disease problems, often you can nip them in the bud,
Okay.
right? Some things can be pruned out really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I suggest people do when they are researching their fruit trees, talk to local growers to find out
Mm.
what diseases are common in your neighborhood, in your
Mm-hmm.
region, and make sure you go and buy a fruit tree that is resistant to those
Yeah.
diseases.
Yeah.
So saves you so much time and energy. Because here's the
Yeah.
problem: any fruit tree you plant is going to look great for the first year or two. They just do. They're going to be great. It's in year 3 when they start to get, whatever disease is flying around the neighborhood, and you think,
Yeah.
what's this? What's going on? Oh my gosh.
Mm.
And then you've wasted 3 years because you planted a tree. Let's say there's rust problems,
Yeah.
pear trellis rust or cedar apple rust, and you bought a tree that's vulnerable to that because you
Hmm.
heard the fruit tastes good.
Yeah.
And then, whoa, there's 3 years you wasted cultivating a tree, and it's not going to be so easy to grow. So
Yeah.
if you do your research ahead of time, you do save yourself some heartache.
Yeah, I know here in Australia we've got a company called Daly's Fruit Trees. And on it, it actually shows you not just the climate that it's best suited to, but it will tell you when it fruits and then what other trees to buy with it so that it does cross pollinate and all its needs. And so I actually got all nerdy and made an Excel spreadsheet to make sure that everything that I bought was for my area and that it had something close by that would cross pollinate. And then with my apples, I've got about 6. So they're all in pairs, but also the fact that I'll get a really long harvest because they'll go really early, kind of middle, and then late cropping apples as well, and making sure they've got partners so that they're obviously still going to cross pollinate. Because I've seen that happen before where someone will buy 2 apples and they're fruiting at different times and then you don't end up with any fruit. So it's really important to do that research. And yeah, something that's really specific, like cherries. I would love to grow cherries, but we're in the subtropics. So there's very, very specific kind of cherries that I need to buy to actually get fruit.
You know what? I love how you call it nerdy, but when you're growing fruit trees, you got to be nerdy, especially
Yeah.
when you do the spreadsheet in the class that I teach on choosing a fruit tree. We go through, it's a 2-hour, really fun interactive class. But we go through, and what I do is I get the students I say, okay, here's a fruit tree nursery catalog. Pick 3 trees that you want to plant in your backyard, and I give them a little spreadsheet kind of to fill out. Write down the trees. And
Mm-hmm.
they write down the trees, like maybe it's like 1 peach and maybe 1 apple and maybe 1 pear. I'll say, okay, guys, now let's learn about cross pollination. I
Yeah.
teach them about cross pollination, how many types of trees actually need pollination partners, and they can't
Mm.
produce fruit if they don't have a compatible partner. So I
Yeah.
said, I teach them all of that. And then I say, okay, look at your list and
Mm-hmm.
tell me how much fruit you're going to have. And mostly they'll be like, oh, I would have only
Mm.
had fruit on the peach tree, which is self pollinating. The other 2 trees, that would have been a waste of my time.
And
So I say,
money.
okay, yeah, and money. And so I say,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, so go back to the fruit tree nursery catalog and now choose some trees that will cross pollinate. So they go back and they change their decisions. Then I
Yeah.
teach them about disease resistant trees or
Mm.
climate zones or whatever. So step by step. So your
Yeah, just
spreadsheet approach
building.
is the approach. You're building
Yeah.
step by step. Wouldn't you rather make your mistakes on paper
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
rather
yeah.
than investing the
Yeah.
time and money to grow those trees and
Mm.
then finding out, whoops, that didn't work? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're all so excited, especially when the spring comes and you're ready to go and buy stuff. And there's the cutest trees at the garden center. Oh, we could have Honeycrisp apples. That would be so great.
Yeah.
Apparently, they sell like Honeycrisp apples everywhere, even in climates where the tree
Yeah.
itself won't thrive. But
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
like Honeycrisp apples. So they don't, that's not very ethical. I don't think your local nursery would do that.
Well, it's
But
surprising. Some of the big chains will sell
mm,
things like the cherries. They're selling cherries that I know won't grow in this climate, and people will just go and buy them. So
oh, that is
it's
so
sad.
not right. That's
It's
not
sad.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just quickly, because we're coming up on nearly an hour of chatting already. What about multi-grafting? Have you got any tips or thoughts on that?
Well, you asked me what about multi-grafting, and I think multi-grafting is terrific if you're grafting your own trees and you're adding branches to an existing tree or even creating trees from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think buying a multi-graft tree is a great
Uh,
idea.
Okay. And why is that?
Here's the problem. Multi-graft trees, first of all, I'm very cautious about choosing the right varieties.
Mm-hmm.
The easier to grow varieties, disease resistant. Usually you are going to get the most common varieties that you get from the supermarket that are designed to be grown with harsh pesticides and fungicides. So, not a big fan because the type of fruit you're going to grow is maybe popular, but not easy to grow. I'm
Sure.
also not a big fan because pruning is, if you want to grow your fruit tree without chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
pruning is one of the top ways that you're going to keep your tree healthy and productive. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as somebody else has grafted branches on a young tree, you can't really prune those branches off in order to create the right shape for your tree. You're
Mm-hmm.
stuck with them. You have to work around it. And it's hard. I have lots of students who I've recorded videos where I'm trying to give them advice and we're working together to say, okay, where are we going to make the pruning cuts? We want to
Mm-hmm.
create a nice open, airy structure for the tree that will
Yeah.
be strong, but two of the branches are very close together and you can't prune either of them off. So
Yeah.
it's very limiting. Saying that, if you are willing to learn the skill of grafting, which is super fun, I've got a book on that, I've got courses on that as well, then what you can do is when your trees are a little bit older, let's say you have, a couple of apple trees in the backyard, two different types of apples,
Yeah.
and one ripens, in the late summer and one ripens in the early fall, but you'd
Mm-hmm.
like to have some more apples, maybe late fall ripening apples or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Once your tree is somewhat mature, like maybe just a few years old, maybe 4 years old or something like that, you
Mm-hmm.
can very easily graft on branches of multiple different cultivars
Yeah.
on the same
Yeah.
tree.
Cool.
So you
Yeah.
can have in your backyard an apple tree that produces 5 different types of apples.
Mm.
You put the branches where you know the good location is because you know how to
Yeah.
prune your tree.
Yeah.
You probably paint them like where you paint the graft union with just a house paint or something so you remember for years to come. That's the branch I don't want to cut off.
Yeah.
And it's fabulous. It's a great way to have a very fruitful garden with lots of different, just a great diversity of produce
Yeah.
that you're growing.
Yeah. And I guess for an urban context, really ideal that you've got the one tree with multiple different fruit on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
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 Oh, amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I feel like we could have spoken for another hour and still not gotten through half the questions I have, but I will go and digest all of that and then take it to the next step.
That sounds great. And if
Yeah.
people want to learn more about me and what I do, you can go to orchardpeople.com.
Yeah.
And I have 4 books on fruit tree care. I have online courses in
Mm-hmm.
fruit tree care. I have students from all over the world. And I have a podcast, lots of articles, and hopefully I can help people through the materials that I create.
Yeah, amazing. We'll put all the links in the show notes for anybody that's interested.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
No problem. Thanks, Susan.
Bye for now.
Bye.